always thought betrayal would come with warning signs, suspicious glances, hushed phone calls, maybe a sudden change in tone. But the truth, it slid in quietly, dressed in celebration, wrapped in laughter and toasts, wearing the perfume of family. The ballroom smelled faintly of roses and champagne. Gold-trimmed tables glittered under the soft chandeliers. Waiters weaved through a sea of old friends and extended cousins, their trays stacked with flutes of bubbly and crusted hors d'oeuvres. My parents' 40th wedding anniversary was supposed to be a landmark, a tribute to a union that had endured everything from financial hardship to my mother's cancer scare. They'd made it through, together. That was the point of tonight, endurance, and so I smiled for the photographers, for the relatives I hadn't seen since I was a child, for my husband, David, who stood beside me in his dark navy suit like a polished pillar of support. I smiled for our daughter, Clara, 17, and sharper than glass, who had insisted on helping organize the event. She was the only person I trusted completely, or had until that moment when she whispered 5 words that froze my spine. "Mom, you need to leave now." Her voice was low but sharp, slicing through the music and murmurs. Her wide, frightened eyes said more than her lips ever could. I blinked, stunned. "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed my wrist gently, but urgently, and tried to steer me toward the service hallway near the back. I hesitated, and that cost me. Because that's when I heard it, the sudden hush of a room turning its collective gaze. I turned back toward the main floor. A man was standing at the mic. Not just any man. My ex-husband. Claire's biological father. Daniel. He shouldn't have been there. He wasn't invited. He hadn't even spoken to me in over a decade. The last I heard, he was living in Florida with his 3rd wife and bankrupt business. But there he stood, looking far too smug for someone in borrowed clothes, David's hand clenched around his champagne glass. My father, halfway through cutting the cake, lowered the knife slowly, confusion flashing across his face. The band fell silent. Daniel cleared his throat and leaned into the mic. "I know this is a special night," he said, grinning, "and I wouldn't want to spoil it. But I couldn't stay silent any longer." Clara was still tugging at me, but my feet were planted in concrete. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "I have a few words to say," he continued. "About the woman you're all celebrating. About Rebecca." The blood drained from my face. David moved then, stepping forward, but not fast enough. "You all think she's the perfect daughter, wife, and mother," Daniel said. "But I think you deserve to know she's been keeping secrets." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. "I have proof." The paper trembled slightly in his hand, whether from adrenaline or anticipation, I couldn't tell. Every eye in the room was now on me. My mother's mouth parted in confusion. My father's brow furrowed with quiet dread, and Claire, my sweet, protective Claire, she looked on the verge of tears. I don't remember crossing the room, but suddenly I was at the edge of the stage, just as Daniel began to read aloud. "She lied to me about Clara. She kept her from me. Told everyone I abandoned her, when in truth she filed restraining orders. Told the court I was dangerous. But guess what? Those were dropped. No charges, no evidence. Just a woman trying to erase me." Murmurs, a loud gasp. One of my cousins dropped her wine glass. The smash echoed through the stunned silence. "She told David the first was a threat, that I'd disappeared. But I'm alive, and I've been trying to contact my daughter for years. Letters, emails, blocked, deleted." He held up the printed copies. "And here's the kicker, this party? This happy family gathering, it's built on lies. Rebecca lied to everyone for years." David moved to grab the mic, but Daniel had made his exit, practically dancing offstage and disappearing through the main doors with a proud smirk and no regard for the havoc he just unleashed. I stood frozen. Then Clara stepped in front of me, voice steady but cold. "I told you to leave." "I tried to stop this, Clara," I whispered. You knew?" She looked away, and that's when I realized she hadn't been trying to stop Daniel. She had helped him. The first real wave of betrayal didn't hit until I saw my father lower himself into a chair like the strength had been pulled out of his spine. My mother stood behind him, her trembling hand covering her mouth. Guests were already whispering, moving away from me like I had something contagious. David approached, his expression unreadable. "Is it true?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "You never told me about this, David. He was abusive." That's not what he just said. I was trying to protect Clara. I did protect her. He looked at Clara. "And what about you? Did you know he was coming?" She didn't answer. The room felt like it was tilting. I had spent years burying the past for the sake of my daughter. For my own sanity, Daniel had been toxic, jealous, controlling, manipulative. He never struck me, no. But he'd made me doubt myself, isolate myself. When I left him, I vowed I'd never give him another inch of my life. I fought to keep Clara safe from him. And now, my own daughter had invited him into the one place I thought he'd never reach. My family. The aftermath was slow and cruel. People didn't say anything to my face, but I felt their silence like daggers. I saw the shift in their eyes, the way they tilted their heads when speaking to each other behind folded napkins. Old friends canceled our dinner plans. My mother stopped calling. My father sent a text short, cold, "I need time to process." David didn't move out, but he might as well have. We became two shadows in the same house, orbiting each other with quiet suspicion. I offered explanations, documents, court papers, witness testimonies. He read none of them. And Clara, she shut me out completely. I wanted to know him. She finally said, a week later, "You never gave me a choice." Maybe he's not perfect, but at least he's honest. That line nearly broke me. I wanted to scream that I had been honest. I wanted to rip open the file drawers where I had saved every toxic message Daniel had sent. I wanted to show her the therapist's notes, the custody battle records, the years of rebuilding my life from his wreckage, but I didn't, because what good would it do? She didn't want to see it. Not yet. So I waited, I watched, and I started to notice the little things. Clara's phone, always buzzing with notifications she quickly silenced. Whispered conversations in the hallway with her door slightly ajar. Receipts in her purse for plane tickets I didn't know she had taken. And then, one day, while folding laundry, I found the letter. It was tucked in a sweater pocket, one she hadn't worn in months. A handwritten letter in Daniel's unmistakable script. "Clara, when you're ready, I want you to move here. You don't belong with her, you belong with me. I can't give you everything she denied you. You deserve more." The date was 3 weeks before the party, before the ambush, before my entire life collapsed under the weight of one man's lies and my daughter's blind belief in them. I didn't cry. Not then. I sat very still on the edge of Clara's bed and reread the letter until the words blurred into nothing. He wasn't finished with me. This wasn't about reconciliation or fatherhood. It was about punishment. He was using Clara as a weapon, as a mirror to reflect everything he thought I'd stolen from him. But he had no idea who he was dealing with now. He had underestimated the woman he'd tried to erase. Revenge doesn't always come in fire and fury. Sometimes it comes in quiet, deliberate steps. In research. In planning. In precision. And as I sat there on the bed, the letter trembling in my hand, the first sharp edge of a plan began to form in my mind. Daniel had exposed me in front of everyone I loved. Now it was my turn, and I would not miss. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the kitchen, the letter spread across the table under the glow of a single lamp. It stared up at me like a curse, a quiet betrayal penned by a man who never learned to lose with grace. The soft clicks of the wall clock seemed louder than usual, and with every tick, I reminded myself, this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Clara, about showing her the truth, not just what Daniel had hidden, but what she needed to see for herself, because the only thing more dangerous than a liar is one who tells just enough of the truth to sound convincing. By morning, I had a plan. I began with the one thing Daniel had never been smart enough to cover, his ego. It turned out that his reinvention in Florida had not gone nearly as smoothly as he let on. A few keyword searches later, I discovered multiple failed businesses under his name, to lawsuits for breach of contract, and a newly opened nonprofit suspiciously tied to the same bank account as his personal one. But that wasn't the gold came when I traced his real estate records. The house he had told Clara he bought with new success was actually owned by a woman named Megan, his third wife, whom he had divorced 8 months prior. Florida property records don't lie. Neither do divorce settlements. And Daniel? He had walked away with next to nothing. So where was he getting the money to promise Clara a new life? That's when I checked my parents' names. It turned out Daniel had recently contacted them, claiming he wanted to rebuild and make peace. He told them he'd found faith, redemption, sobriety, whatever life it best, and then he asked for an investment opportunity they hadn't told me. Not because they trusted him, but because they were ashamed. They didn't want to admit that he'd charmed them, manipulated them, that my mother had almost wired him $40,000 before my father quietly stopped it. The night of the anniversary party hadn't been spontaneous. It had been a performance, and Clara had been his perfect, unsuspecting pawn. The betrayal burned deeper each day. Claire grew colder toward me, more distant. She'd started staying out late, telling me she was with friends when I knew she wasn't. Once, I found her suitcase under the bed half packed. When I confronted her, she didn't yell or cry. She just looked at me and said, "You lied about him for 17 years. Now I get to decide who I trust." It gutted me. But I kept my voice steady. "I didn't lie. I protected you from what?" She snapped. "From a man who wanted to love me." But that wasn't love, that was grooming. I knew Daniel. I had once loved him, too, before I realized love was just another tool in his belt. He only ever gave it when it got him something in return. So I stopped arguing, stopped begging. And I watched. Because if Clara was going to believe him, it wouldn't be because of a battle of words. She would need to see it, all of it. I dug deeper. A friend of mine from law school, now a private investigator, owed me a favor. Within days, she'd gathered surveillance of Daniel's house. Photos of him coming and going with a younger woman. Receipts showing expensive dinners and jewelry he couldn't afford on paper. And then his text. My friend managed to legally intercept a set of messages sent to a burner phone. They were crude, flirtatious, manipulative. "She's almost ready. Once she's here, we'll get access to her trust fund, play the long game. Make her think her mom's unstable. Teen girls love a hero. Just keep being the cool dad." Those messages were a knife to my chest. Claire's trust fund, established by my parents in her name when she was born, was locked until she turned 21. But if she emancipated from me legally, she could access a portion of it sooner. That was his goal. He didn't want to be her father. He wanted to use her, steal from her, and he had almost succeeded. I printed every document, every screenshot, every timestamp. I arranged them in order like chapters in a horror story. Then I waited. It came sooner than I expected. One night, Claire came home past midnight. Her hair smelled like smoke, and her eyes were red, not from crying, but from whatever she'd been doing. She stumbled into the hallway, tossed her keys onto the console, and barely glanced at me. "I'm leaving," she said. The words weren't emotional. They were numb. I rose slowly from the sofa. "Where to Dad's? He bought me a ticket." "I leave Saturday," I nodded. Then I said, "Can we talk first?" She crossed her arms. "What's the point?" "No point, just 15 minutes. That's all I ask." She didn't answer, but she didn't leave the room either. I led her to the dining table. The folder was already there, thick with evidence. I didn't dramatize it. Didn't beg. I simply opened it. "Start here," I said, pointing to the first page. "Read in order." She rolled her eyes, but flipped to the first document. Then the second. Then the third. Her face changed slowly, like the shadow of realization crawling over her features inch by inch. The text made her blink. The bank records made her hand tremble. And when she reached the photos, Daniel kissing another woman just days before the party, she went completely still. Her fingers tightened around the page until the edges crumpled. "Is this real?" She whispered. "I'm sorry," I said. "I know you wanted him to be something he's not." I did, too. Once, tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't cry. Instead, she stood, and she walked out of the room, That was 3 days before everything changed because Clara didn't go to Florida. She went to the police, then she went to my father, and then together they went to the press. It began with a small piece in the local paper. Ex-husband of prominent family accused of grooming teenage daughter for financial exploitation. It featured the text, the documents, the manipulated inheritance plan. The piece went viral within 48 hours. Daniel's nonprofit was flagged by the IRS. His accounts were frozen. And Megan, his most recent ex, filed a formal complaint stating he had attempted the same trust fund scheme with her niece just months prior. Suddenly, he wasn't just a petty manipulator. He was a predator. And Clara? She made a public statement. I believed someone because I wanted to feel loved, but real love doesn't come with secrets or lies or threats. I watched her on the screen, standing tall behind the podium, a quiet storm behind her words. I had never been prouder, but that wasn't the end. Daniel fought back, of course. He hired a lawyer, screamed defamation, claimed he was the victim of a vindictive ex-wife, but it didn't matter. The evidence was too deep, too clear, and, for once, he had picked a fight with someone who knew exactly how he operated. I didn't go to court. I didn't need to. Clara testified. The same girl who once told me to leave a party in shame now stood before a judge and dismantled her father's defense with calm, calculated truth. She didn't just reclaim her trust fund. She reclaimed herself. Daniel was charged with multiple counts: fraud, attempted coercion, and, in light of his past conduct, potential exploitation of a minor. He fled the state before the warrant came through. He's still out there somewhere, running, hiding, but you can't outrun truth, and you can't hide from the people you tried to destroy, especially not when they finally stand together. The first time I saw Clara after the trial, really saw her not on a courtroom bench or through a half-open bedroom door. She was sitting alone in the garden behind my parents' house. Her shoulders were hunched forward, hands folded tightly. In her lap, it was early evening, and the sky behind her burned gold and lavender. I stood watching for a long moment, unsure if I should approach. Everything had changed in a matter of weeks. The story had gone national. News anchors dissected every word of her testimony. Online articles speculated about the psychological damage Daniel had caused. And while Clara had become the face of the girl who turned the tables, I knew. Fame didn't protect you. If anything, it exposed you further. I stepped onto the grass, slow and quiet. She looked up, then back down. I know what you're going to say, she said. Her voice was low, but steady. No, I replied, sitting beside her. You don't? She turned slightly toward me, expectant, guarded, still not ready to trust completely. I was going to say, I continued, that I'm sorry it took him breaking your heart for you to believe me. Her lips pressed together. But I'm also proud of you, I added, for what you did. For how you did it. She looked at me then, her eyes rimmed in tired red. Not from crying, but from the weight of knowing more than she was ready for. I was stupid, she said. I wanted him to be a hero so badly. You weren't stupid, I said. You were 17. You believed someone you were supposed to be able to believe. A long pause. Then she asked the question that had lived between us for years. Why didn't you tell me everything before? I thought about that. About the nights I sat in courtrooms fighting for full custody, about the therapists who warned me not to let her meet him until she was older. About the time she asked, at age 6, if her daddy loved her, and I just smiled and said, he's just far away, sweetheart. And I finally answered, because I wanted to give you a chance to grow up without his poison. I didn't want your childhood colored by what he did to me. And now? She whispered, now you're not a child anymore, I said. Now, you deserve to know everything. We talked for hours. About the past, about how Daniel slowly wore down my sense of self-worth, how he used silence and affection like coins in a machine, only giving them when I obeyed. About the night I locked myself in a bathroom after he slammed a door so hard the mirror cracked. Not because he hit me, but because I was starting to wish he would, so I'd have proof, something people would believe. Clara listened, cried, then asked questions I'd always feared, but answered anyway. The next morning, she moved back home. 3 months later, we rebuilt. Piece by piece. David We didn't make it. The damage from Daniel's ambush had cut too deep, and my marriage hadn't been as strong as I thought. But it ended quietly, without bitterness. David apologized deeply, sincerely. And I accepted that sometimes a shared history just isn't enough. But Clara and we were stronger than ever. Clara decided to go public again, this time on her terms. She spoke at schools, on panels, to lawmakers. She pushed for stricter laws on digital exploitation and financial grooming of minors. She even testified at a hearing proposing changes to emancipation loopholes. One afternoon, after a campus event, she turned to me in the car and said, "He gave me a voice I didn't know I had. By trying to use me, he ended up giving me power." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You turned poison into fire." And then, one autumn morning, the letter came. It was from Megan Daniels' third ex-wife. She'd been following the case quietly. And now, she had something to add. "I believe your ex-husband was planning to do the same thing to my niece," the letter read. She's 16, and recently, she received text from him offering to help her escape her controlling parents. The same language he used with Clara. Attached were screenshots. Familiar lies, but there was something else in the envelope, a photograph of Daniel standing at a gas station in Nevada. He had grown a beard, lost weight, changed his name on credit cards, but it was him. And he was still moving. Still looking for another target. Clara read the letter in silence. Then she stood and walked to the fireplace, held the photograph over the flame, and dropped it in. "He doesn't get to take anything else from anyone." The ashes curled and collapsed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. 6 months passed. Life settled. The noise faded. We moved to a smaller place near the coast. Clara started college. She majored in law. "I want to do what you did," she told me once. "Help people no one believes." Every now and then, I still look over my shoulder. Still wonder if Daniel's out there watching, waiting. But now, if he comes, he won't find the broken girl he tried to use, or the woman he once controlled. He'll find 2 women with fire in their veins. He'll find the storm he created, and this time we'll be ready.